hate happiness.
You're all losers. We've discussed this before.
Andrew Tate. How did I get here? How did we, as a society, get here? Andrew Tate is not somebody that I'm going to waste any time introducing you all to because I presume that we're all sadly very familiar with him at this point. The former kickboxer who now makes his money essentially trafficking women and selling pyramid schemes to lost, lonely young men, all while spewing the most controversial, abrasive opinions he possibly can all over social media to gain as much attention and notoriety as possible. Yeah, that's the guy. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be referring to this mentality that he has, that he ends up spreading to his followers, as the Andrew Tate disease. This disease is essentially comprised of black and white thinking, no grey areas, no room for nuance, and it's really very simple to understand, such as females and traditionally feminine traits such as being passive, showing emotions, bad, and males and traditionally masculine traits such as assertiveness and combativeness equals good. He also believes that no woman is capable of fighting or beating any man in a fight. Women's place is inside the home.
You stay in the house. You don't go nowhere.
Men need to physically battle each other for dominance all the time.
I'm gonna be like, bang, oh, seen that before. Okay, boom, boom, duck and dive and take one terrorist out. Next, get the AK, go Rambo.
And money and power should be the primary objective of every man's life.
You are poor. So when I sit here and make this video and call you poor, you can't sit here and go, I'm actually not poor, I'm doing pretty good with my business actually, and I have a nice car that you have less than me!
The primary objective of every woman's life, on the other hand, is to blindly obey such a man and serve simply as a vessel for their future children. In short, he's a glorified old man from the 1950s trying to bring his era back to relevance in 2022.
You stay in the house. You don't go nowhere. You don't no restaurants, no clubs, nothing.
Now, some of you out there might be thinking that the way to stop the spread of this Andrew Tate disease is to stop fueling it by giving him attention that he probably craves. Well, I know that prevention is better than the cure in most cases of diseases, but I think that when Andrew Tate is the most searched public figure on multiple social media platforms, we have to admit that the disease of Andrew Tate is far too widespread and advanced for us to be looking at the preventative measures to stop the spread of his influence by simply not talking about him, not acknowledging his existence, for example. So rather than preventing the spread of his influence by simply refusing to acknowledge his existence and not talking about him at all, I think it's now far more urgent and important that we focus on finding the cure of this disease that has now done so much damage already in this body of the world. And that is why I'm talking about this horrible person today, damage control, because this sick individual is unfortunately already damaging the minds of many young people at an alarming rate. So what is the reason for the spread of this Andrew Tate disease? Well, Tate has a warped, but perhaps to his credit, an incredibly easy to understand perspective. He sees things in black and white, and this is why it's so easy for anybody to understand this message and why it's so easy for all his words to spread like wildfire. As I said earlier, it's basically females and men who display feminine traits are bad, weak, and inferior, and males or alpha males who display stereotypically masculine traits, have a good job, have lots of money, and are very physically competent in a fight, are superior, and there's really not much else there to it. It goes without saying that this is a very, very basic, almost infantile way of viewing the world, because most people, when they become adults, become aware of nuance, and they become aware that most things in life are not black or white, good or bad, superior or inferior, but are actually all different shades of grey. They become aware that overgeneralized statements about women or men or black people or white people are pretty much futile to make, because one only has to go outside and look around to find an exception for any rule they might make about human behaviour in society. So we, and most people in fact, don't tend to make these overgeneralised, oversimplified, divisive statements anymore once we reach adulthood. As perhaps a consequence of that, we all go around living our lives with these sort of tepid, lukewarm beliefs, things that are neither really definitively here or there, because to be quite honest with you, that's what life is like in the real world. It's all complicated, it's all different shades of grey, and you cannot say with concrete certainty really anything. unless the evidence suggests it. But this is why when someone like Andrew Tate comes in with these scorching hot takes, they shock us to our core and make us really stop and pay attention. And when we do pay attention, it can be either an immensely negative or an immensely positive experience for us, depending on whether or not we enjoy this extreme version of this narrative that he is spewing. For those who have secretly had experiences that to some extent back up what he is saying, but have been too afraid to speak up about it, or at least too afraid to speak up about it in such a brazenly confrontational way, listening to Andrew Tate may feel validating, and they may want to hop on the Tate train, so to speak, so that they can fly on the wings of his divisive, ballsy rhetoric to make them feel like this perception of a strong alpha man, what a man should be, and moreover at the same time to tell them, you know what, you were actually the victim in your last relationship even though you were the one who did the cheating, and you know what, sure, lots of women reject you, but that's only because women are all simple-minded and as such can't see the brilliance that's standing right there in front of them. These kind of narratives are obviously going to be comforting to men who have felt maybe hurt by women in the past. Sometimes they may have even had the right to feel that way, and it validates the pain that they may have felt from those past experiences. The problem is when they then use all their past experiences to paint all women with the same brush, and even then ignore evidence that would contradict that past experience of theirs, and also to start living in an echo chamber where they're not going to have any new experiences that would contradict those past experiences either. Andrew Tate himself has said that he will value anecdotal evidence, his own experiences, over scientific data and studies any day of the week. These men feel comforted by Andrew Tate in a way because he is validating the pain that they may have experienced at the hands of women who maybe rejected them. And that feeling of safety, feeling heard and validated by somebody in a way that nobody else may have made you feel safe or validated before, creates intense loyalty. Blind loyalty, in fact, to the point where they can hear everything he says as gospel, even the things that don't directly relate to their own past experiences. They think that if Andrew Tate was right about one thing that happened in their lives that they think no one else in their life understood, then he must also be right about all these other things that he believes as well. Now it's not just, it was my girlfriend's fault that I cheated, it's now, all girlfriends have a responsibility to stop their man from cheating by whatever means necessary. As I was editing this video, I just realised that I'd forgotten to mention a few points. One of them is, the reason why we should cure these young men of this Andrew Tate disease is not just so that they can stop harming women, it's so that they can stop harming themselves and harming other men as well with this mentality. As is so often the case with misogynistic viewpoints, what often ends up happening is that men who end up being the victim of women, or even displaying any traits that are associated with women, end up being looked down upon and shamed, and this further perpetuates the issue that men currently have with not feeling able to express their emotions or vulnerabilities, as this is a feminine trait, or considered a feminine trait. And people like Andrew Tate don't just shun women, they shun all displays of femininity, such as being vulnerable, being open, sharing your emotions, or even just anything that isn't outright masculine physical aggression. So as you can see, on one hand, Andrew Tate praises men for having to put up with so many shallow materialistic women, but on the other hand, he punishes men for ever finding themselves in a position where they may, through no fault of their own, end up being the victim of one, which relates to my previous video about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. The moment you have misogyny, you have people who won't be taken seriously if they end up being taken advantage of or harmed by a woman, because it is assumed that women should not be capable of doing such a thing to a real strong man. Because the implication is that if you end up being the victim of a woman, you are laughable or less of a man. So this is why it is so important that we cure the Andrew Tate disease, not just for the young women of the world, but also for the young men as well, who could end up not being taken seriously as a result of this misogynistic viewpoint that says that no woman should ever be able to harm them in a meaningful way because women are too weak. So all of this is a right old mess, so what is the cure for Andrew Tate disease? Well, the cure for the Andrew Tate disease is something that Andrew Tate himself really needs, and that is basically just to go outside and form new experiences that contradict your old experiences. New experiences so that you can learn that no, not all women are like that. No, money and power isn't the only thing that will make you happy, and no, not every man who shows emotion is actually weak. Another cure for Andrew Tate disease is actually looking at evidence and data and seeing if it supports your beliefs and supports your past experiences.
Finding some study and saying that this is the truth. You want to sit here and say, oh, the internet said X. I'm sure the internet did. I'm talking about my personal experiences, and some people agree with me and some people do not.
Because, fun fact, evidence is actually just repeated experiences from other people that fall into the same pattern that actually holds up under scrutiny and unbiased testing. You need to listen to this evidence even if it contradicts the odd past experiences you may have had with your own limited perspective. Just because it happened to you doesn't mean it's more important than what has happened to several other people who underwent a study and came out with a different outcome. And yeah, the cure for Andrew Tate disease, I think quite simply, is just to go outside, and soon enough life will reveal to you all of its beautiful complexity, nuances and grey areas, and shatters the illusion of all of these bigoted black and white views that you have had. Also, people that have fallen victim to Andrew Tate disease need to realise that there are other people other than Andrew Tate who will validate your struggles and listen to your pain. There are people out there who are interested in your experiences, interested in your emotions, interested in your mental health struggles, who won't then use that and turn it around against you to sell you some glorified pyramid scheme. Ironically, the cure for the Andrew Tate belief system is something that Andrew Tate himself does not allow himself access to. Andrew Tate thinks that all women are shallow, simple-minded and materialistic, but he actually said himself on record that he prefers to date 18 or 19-year-olds just because they are simply more easy for him to be able to brainwash. And 18 or 19-year-olds of either sex will be more simple-minded. Their brains just physically haven't developed enough yet to where they could be more intelligent, could be more complex. So whilst he believes all women are simple, he purposefully deprives himself of other interactions he might have with more complex, perhaps older women, simply because that would mean that he would end up having less power over them. Thus, he values the power that he wants to have over women so much that he actually ends up moving forward in a way that would only confirm all his previously held beliefs about women. Another thing that he believes is that all women are materialistic, but the irony is one has to actually consider the kind of woman who would even be with Andrew Tate, would even allow themselves into his space, because let's face it, Andrew Tate thinks that you as a woman are his property, he's entitled to anything you may earn with your body, you're not allowed to leave his house, and you're probably not allowed to make friends with either sex either. So I genuinely think the only appeal that Andrew Tate would hold for single women is the fact that he is wealthy, which is a materialistic way of viewing a potential relationship. So actually, the only reason I think any woman would subject themselves to being with Andrew Tate is if they were so materialistic that all of his wealth, status, power, what have you, somehow overrides whatever else he may have going on personality-wise in their minds. And that sounds pretty materialistic to me. And thus, the women that subject themselves to being with him are probably only with him for his money, thus unconsciously contributing to his narrative that women only like men for their money and what they can provide for them in the material world. So, Andrew, not all women are that way, it's just that the only women who you have been allowed access to have been that way. To say that all women are materialistic just because the only women you've ever been allowed to date have been materialistic, so ridiculously flawed I can't even wrap my head around it. It's like he overlooks the context and the reasons for why things are the way that they are because he's just that desperate to keep being a misogynist, to the point where he will discount actual evidence in favour of his beliefs, such as the example of women actually being better drivers than men, or at the very least responsible for less accidents on the road than men. And you know, maybe he would be able to see that some women in the world are not materialistic and not simple-minded if he himself would develop a personality for himself more than just what colour is your Bugatti.
And I said, well, what colour's your Bugatti?
My message to Andrew Tate. So Andrew, I would just like to say that it's okay to not despise women beyond all logic and reason. Don't know why it makes you feel so much better to put down an entire gender over and over again, even when actual evidence says otherwise, but at this point I'm kind of just sorry for whatever hurt caused this, because the way you're behaving is like a dog that has been abused in the past and then lashes out the moment anybody tries to have any contact with it again. It's not rational, it's not logical, it's just hurtful and aggressive. And therefore I can only assume that you're acting out of emotion, ironically that stereotypically feminine trait that you probably hate so much, emotion from some sort of past hurt that we as the peasants around you are simply not privy to knowing or understanding. So I am sorry that you are evidently so hurt and broken, because the way your mentality is resembles that of a literal child or somebody who is just broken. Quite possibly you are both, and maybe you suffered some sort of trauma in childhood that you have never been able to move past from and are now stuck in whatever developmental age you were when that trauma happened to you. So you now surround yourself with yes men, men who are insecure about their own issues and their own trauma, women who are only with you for your money, and in a country where you can bribe your way out of any trouble or frankly any accountability you may have to take for anything you do or say. You have made it so that there is not one person who could ever challenge you or change your narrow perspective, because you have purposely deprived yourself of the outside contact from the real world. Because you don't want to know the real world. You want to remain in the damaged, traumatized, albeit safe perspective of a broken man that you have been living in your whole life. So much so that the thought of changing or ever looking beyond this perspective is probably so terrifying to you that you now have to literally do mental acrobatics to defend your warped view of the world. For someone who is so accomplished as a physical fighter, I find it ironic that mentally you seem to live in so much fear. And the band-aid that you slap on this fear, the band-aid that you slap on all the trauma that you've probably experienced in your past to make you this way, is money, power, and status which you acquire by spewing your warped, traumatized views onto as many impressionable young minds as possible, who will fall prey to your pyramid schemes as you promise them a lavish lifestyle of money, status, and success that you have acquired for yourself. The problem with this lavish lifestyle that you're promising, though, it's empty. It's hollow. That's why you, Andrew Tate, are never at peace, never happy, and in your own words, always seeking more. Because deep down, you know the ego will never be satisfied. The soul will never be satisfied. And so you chase more and more money, more and more power, more and more influence in a vain attempt to try to fill the void within you, when in reality, what you probably really needed all along was healing. And I'm sorry that nobody showed you a healthier way to heal from the damage that was done to you by some women in your life, I don't know. What I do know is that if you devoted even one fraction of energy that you put into putting women down in discussions on podcasts to self-development, self-exploration, and heck, maybe even therapy, you might actually find true happiness, true peace within yourself, the kind that can't be bought or bribed into being. I know, it's a strange foreign concept, but please, at least for your own sake, if not for the sake of the millions of impressionable young minds that you are ruining with your rhetoric, please consider seeking help. To think that anybody could wholeheartedly, unironically believe the black and white rhetoric of Andrew Tate is genuinely laughable to me, but I recognise that that is because I have had the luxury of varied life experiences of love, happiness, different types of experiences with both men and women, different things that will make me aware that it simply isn't possible to generalize something such as all women are X and all men are Y, and money and power is the only thing to make you happy, etc, etc. But for those who haven't had this experience of the world, then the completely brazenly confident, self-assured delivery that Andrew Tate has might actually convince you that he's right, and that's what's terrifying. For example, if I was a teenager or a child or just a very lonely, depressed and confused young man, I would be much more likely to fall victim to this kind of brainwashing. This is what makes Andrew Tate's perfect victim, somebody who has limited or one-sided experiences of the world and for whatever reason already has a predisposition towards hating women and blaming them for all of their own issues. Can then confirm and validate this predisposition towards hating women and then use it to essentially sell them other stuff that benefits him. Therefore, what is needed here to prevent the spread of Andrew Tate disease is for us to have honest, open discourse with vulnerable young men. If you have a son, if you have a friend, if you have a brother, then for the love of God, reach out to them. We already have a epidemic in this society because young men do not feel that they can open up to anyone about any of the struggles they are going through. So what is required now is for all of us to collectively agree that we are going to make an active effort to be a safe space for these kinds of vulnerable young men. We need to be the safe space for these men to vent their feelings, their struggles, their emotions, and if they are struggling, we have to be the ones who will swoop in and save them, remind them of reality, of healthy coping mechanisms and healthy ways of processing their trauma and dealing with the world, before somebody like Andrew Tate comes in and does it for us. Because before Andrew Tate, before any radicalized person, any cult leader, any influencer got a hold of your brother, son, or friend, your brother, son, or friend was simply a human being who felt lost and was waiting to be found. Found by somebody, one charismatic person who would make them feel safe and like it was okay to be themselves, because they didn't find that in anyone else around them until that point. If we can be that person for them first, we can prevent the spread of the Andrew Tate disease, prevent the spread of cults, prevent the spread of radicalization or whatever else may come in to try to take advantage of these vulnerable young people after we have ignored their struggles to feel purposeful, to feel a sense of belonging, swept it under the rug because it's easier for us to not have to deal with it, and it's easier for us to simply tell them to man up instead. While you tell your son to man up, he will find the comfort and reassurance he needs in personalities like Andrew Tate, who will simply make them feel like it is okay to feel the way that they feel, and they don't just have to man up. They can simply do something much easier, like blaming women, for example, unless you can be that person that steps in and teaches them a healthier way to deal with that feeling. But this involves all of us stepping up and prioritizing the mental health of young men as well as women, instead of assuming that all men can and indeed should simply fend for themselves and man up no matter what they might be going through. Like it or not, young men, and actually men in general, need support. The epidemic that we have is the ugly evidence for that. They need emotional, spiritual support, and if you or other people in their support network do not give it to them, somebody like Andrew Tate will. And that's just the sad truth of how young men and people lacking direction and purpose and somebody to confide in can get exploited and taken advantage of in this world. As I mentioned at the start of this video, curing the Andrew Tate disease is far, far less preferable than simply preventing it from spreading in people, because curing these people who have been brainwashed by Andrew Tate is not going to be for the faint of heart. It would be messy, ugly, and ideally something that actually a trained therapist would do, but we all know that these people aren't exactly going to leap at the chance to sign themselves up to formal therapy sessions. What is vital here is that when somebody falls prey to the Andrew Tate mentality, we should not succumb to the temptation to start hating on them. Why? Because they already hate women, they hate beta men, they already hate so many things, and you can't fight hate with hate, you can't fight fire with fire. What we need to do is merely view these people as unwell, because they had a problem that needed addressing before Andrew Tate came along, and Andrew Tate then came along and addressed it for them, thus creating an even bigger problem. What you will notice about Andrew Tate, and actually a lot of his supporters, is that they are very, very resistant to anything that could challenge, question, or change their current views on the world. But what you need to understand is them refusing to listen to outside perspective or anybody else other than the words of their Lord and Saviour Andrew Tate is actually a fear response. Genuinely, the moment somebody is afraid of having any of their views challenged or changed, no matter what their beliefs are, no matter what side of the political spectrum they may be on, that is a huge red flag. Because the human brain is naturally rather lazy, and so if the human brain is making an extra effort to cling to certain beliefs, even in the face of the current of the stream of everything that proves those beliefs false, you've got to question why they're doing that, what that is coming from, and how they got there. Why are they making such an effort to cling on when it would be far easier to just let go of these damaging thoughts that are creating conflict in their life and those around them? So this is how we should approach conversations with Andrew Tate supporters or fanatics of any kind, really. We need to put aside their surface level inflammatory words, offensive views, and abrasive hostile statements, and we need to find the source of this evil without getting distracted by the outside noise that this sickness produces. This is so that we can remain as clear-headed as possible when trying to find the source of that noise and thus solve the problem. This task obviously won't be for everyone. It won't be for those of us who are still carrying trauma from individuals who are like that. But for those of us that can handle it, it's kind of our duty to try and investigate the source of why these people are the way that they are, what has hurt them so badly in a non-judgmental and compassionate way, so that we can start to maybe make them consider thinking about changing their minds. Because it's unlikely you're going to change someone's mind straight away. It's more likely that you'll get them to consider changing their minds if you give them time and space and make them feel safe to tell you how they're really feeling deep down. This means that if you're trying to debate an Andrew Tate supporter, low-level jabs, insults to their character, they're not going to do anything, because if somebody already feels attacked by you because of these silly insults you're throwing at them, they're not going to let you in to the point where you can actually investigate what's gone wrong with them to make them this way. As fun and as satisfying as it is to hate these people, Andrew Tate and his supporters, to troll them, to bully them, what we really need to realize is that the noise that they're making, this word vomit that they're spewing, is the result of a sickness deep inside of them. This sickness that won't be healed until they actually trust somebody enough to let them in to be able to see what's going on and help them to heal it. This again is why this is the kind of work that a therapist should be doing with them. But since these people would obviously refuse to admit that anything's even wrong with them because that would threaten their own sense of self too much, even if they did, I don't think Tate supporters are really going to believe in therapy anyway. It's not as if they are going to seek that out. And so the only way for these people to get better once they have been ingrained into that philosophy is for those around them to actually step up and try to help them. And it's unlikely that anyone would want to do that given their disgusting attitudes and appalling exterior surface level character traits that would make any sensible person want to run a mile. Nevertheless, that's the only solution I can think of for these people who have been brainwashed by this man. If they're not going to get therapy, it has to be up to us to step up and say, can I deal with this? If I can't, it shouldn't be my responsibility to help and try to change this person, but if I can, then maybe I should consider being the change that I want to see in the world and actually step up and try to change this person's views in a way where you're treating them as somebody unwell rather than somebody hateful and horrible, which, to be honest, they are currently in the state of being Andrew Tate diseased, but they're not at their core. Something's happened to make them that way. And yeah, I just think it's important that we recognize and acknowledge this, that even the most vile seeming human beings, like Andrew Tate supporters, are actually that way because they had some sort of wound that wasn't addressed until Andrew Tate came along, and so now we have to deal with it after Andrew Tate has come in and exacerbated their problems. It's a really unfortunate state of affairs, and this is not me saying, you know, that it's your responsibility to damage your mental health so that you can save somebody else's. I'm just saying that if you feel capable and up to the task, this is something that you need to do if you know somebody who has been influenced by Andrew Tate, and if you think that you can handle talking it through with them in this way. Again, for the third time, actually doing this is not something that will be for everyone by any means at all, but it's just something that I want to share as the only way that I can see anybody recovering from the Andrew Tate disease. And this is an angle that I have not seen many other commentary channels addressing. So another development that I recently was made aware of whilst I was editing this video is the fact that Meta has banned Andrew Tate off of Instagram and Facebook. And I do think that this is quite a good thing. I think it's a step in the right direction in the sense that it will stop his message from being spread further than it already has been. But in a sense, I do feel a bit like it's simply slapping a band-aid on the wound, because I do think that as long as we don't address the deeper societal issues behind why Andrew Tate became popular in the first place, it's only a matter of time until the next Andrew Tate comes along, and the next one to exploit and take advantage of the lonely, lost young men situation that we have in our society at the moment. And I also think that censorship is quite a dangerous move to take, because in a sense it will only radicalize these people who are Andrew Tate supporters even further, and think that the whole world is against them and they are censoring Andrew Tate because he's too strong, he's too powerful, he knows the truth, that's why he's a danger to the powers that be. Now, I think in some ways this could play into the narrative that Andrew Tate himself espouses, that we are living in the Matrix and the mainstream media doesn't want you to know what he knows and what he can share with you. I am, however, pleased that some actions have been taken, and it does reassure me that at least in society there is this acknowledgement that his messages are not good for people to hear, so that's something, I guess. So, in conclusion, in both cases, whether you want to prevent the spread of the Andrew Tate mentality or whether you want to cure your nearest and dearest who have already fallen victim to it, we must actually be, despite our instinct to run a mile and be hateful and troll these people back as hard as they try to offend us, we have to be open-minded and compassionate towards the men who have fallen victim to this or could fall victim to this. Men, including Andrew Tate himself, are surprisingly human beings, and they need to know that they will always have a safe space somewhere somewhere with someone, lest they end up somewhere like in Andrew Tate's war room, God forbid. And again, I am not asking anybody who has suffered abuse at the hands of Andrew Tate or abuse at the hands of his supporters to go in and try to fix them. No, no. You have your own trauma that you need to deal with, and you're just going to make each other worse. I am not recommending this approach for anybody who feels too damaged and too triggered by these people. And I'm also not saying that these people deserve sympathy and deserve for their horrific actions to be excused, because they definitely do not. I'm just saying that we need a different approach if we want to try to solve this problem in our society. Because just like this epidemic, the Andrew Tate disease is a symptom of a society where there are more lost, lonely, and depressed young men around than ever before. Really just need an actual safe space to talk about their feelings, their struggles, and to feel that they are useful and they can contribute some purposeful, meaningful things in society without having to resort to the lowest of the low behavior, the Andrew Tate alpha male mentality, just because that's the only place they've ever felt that they actually fit in and have some meaning in their lives. That, again, is why they will defend these figures like Andrew Tate with such ferocity, because to them, he really could be the guy who saved their life and made them feel like their life actually had purpose and meaning because somebody actually understood their struggles and their emotions for once. It's surprising how many problems in society can actually be traced back to that when you think about it. It's almost as if men are actually human beings who require care as much as anyone else and shouldn't just be told to man up whenever any issues arise for them, but what do I know, I'm just a silly girl on the internet. So I hope this video was in any way valuable to some of you. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I also reply to every single comment, so make sure you leave your hot takes or controversial opinions down in the comment below, or even just comment squid to let me know that you got to the end of the video. That would be very appreciated as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in another video soon. Bye guys.